Hello, welcome back to my channel and welcome to a new video where I'm gonna be telling you about my favorite and least favorite books I read this year. So I'm gonna start by telling you my 5 least favorite books, then I'm actually gonna tell you about 5 disappointing books, so not necessarily my least favorite, but books that I was just expecting to love and then I didn't. And then finally, I will tell you about my 5 favorite books of this year. So starting off with my least favorites, and probably starting off with my actual least favorite book, and that was The Spanish Love Deception. And I want to start by saying that I don't read romance. I don't usually like romance, so I was always likely to not love this book, but I read romance like once a year, and this was for that video. And in this book, we were following Lena, and she needed a date for her sister's wedding because she had been lying to her family saying that she had a boyfriend because she wanted everyone to believe that she had gotten over her ex and like the effects that he had on her life. And she is telling all that to her friend and coworker, and then another coworker called Aaron overhears the conversation, and he actually also needs a date for something, so they agree to basically help each other. And Aaron's date is actually first like the one that he needs her for, and then they go to Spain for the wedding, and they are, pretending to be dating until obviously they start dating for real. And I didn't really like anything about this book. Like, firstly, and probably most importantly, I really didn't like the main character. She was like really, really annoying the whole book. And that definitely, made me not enjoy anything. And she hated Aaron for seemingly no reason because this was like enemies to lovers. And like she hated him for no reason, and I didn't hate him because he didn't have enough personality to hate. Like his only personality trait was that he was obsessed with Lena and he liked dogs. That was it. So I mean, glad he likes dogs, but like, that's not a full personality. And I obviously didn't like the romance. I didn't really feel like any chemistry between them. And I also didn't like the plot, like, apart from the romance. I didn't really like anything. The only, like, funny-ish thing was, like, Lena's family. They were kind of funny, but, like, that was it. And everything else I did not like. And then the second book in my list of least favorite books is actually another romance that I read for the same video, and It Happened One Summer. And in this one, we were following Piper, and she was from LA, and she threw a party that went very wrong, and she ended up in jail, and her stepdad wanted to, kind of teach her a lesson, and so he sent her to the small town where her dad was from, and she was supposed to stay there for 3 months to prove that she was responsible. And she, was there trying to become responsible, and she kept running into Brendan, who was a fisherman from that small town, and, romance stuff. And like he was supposed to be grumpy because this was supposed to be Grumpy Sunshine, but I never thought he was grumpy. Like he was actually pretty nice and welcoming from the start. And in this one, like I didn't hate like the other one. I didn't hate the characters, I didn't hate the romance, I didn't hate the plot. I just felt nothing towards all of it. Like I didn't like or dislike the characters, like I felt nothing towards them. I felt nothing towards the romance. I felt nothing towards the rest of the plot. And you know what? Feeling nothing almost feels worse than hating the book. You know what I mean? So yeah, definitely didn't like this one either. Next, least favorite book was The Guest List, and this one was a mystery thriller, which is much more like in my comfort zone. And this one was about Jules and Will's wedding, which was on an island off the coast of Ireland, and their guests were arriving to the wedding. And well, we know that someone died because we have 2 timelines and we have like 5 or 6 POVs. And yeah, we have 2 timelines, so we know that someone has died when we get like the flash forwards but we don't know who. So we don't really have like an investigation. Even though like I thought it was pretty obvious from the beginning who died, like I had no confirmation. So it's not like I could be, trying to figure out like who hated like that specific person. So we just, we got like why everyone hated everyone basically, and pretty much like everyone had a motive to kill the person that ended up dying. And honestly, like I also guess like all of the motives except for one. And I did not actually guess like who ended up killing the person, but honestly, like I didn't care enough to actually be like, oh my god, what a plot twist, Because like I said, we were following 5 or 6 POVs, and I didn't like any single one of them, and I was just bored. And like I said, since I didn't know like what I was looking for, I was just not invested. You know what I mean? And so yeah, I did not enjoy this one either. Next book was The Skeleton Tree, and this one was a horror book, and we were following Wendy, and she was like obsessed with a house that was for sale, but it was like way too expensive, way too out of her budget, and she never thought that she would actually get that house. But then she actually, gets some extra money that she was not expecting, and she ends up buying the house. And so she and her family, so like her husband and her kids, move into said house. And she starts like hearing stories about the house, like that it could be haunted. And then a relative of the like previous owners talks to her, and they talk about their experiences there at the house, and that like it could actually be haunted. And there is also some like mystery about not exactly the house, but like the neighborhood. And so like I was expecting sort of a haunted house story, but nothing really scary happened. It wasn't really a horror book. It was more like, a family drama, which was not what I was there for. And like the characters were really annoying me, like every single one of them. The only like horror-ish, thriller-ish thing that happened was like the very last 2 paragraphs of the book, which obviously didn't even give me time to enjoy it. So once again, did not like this one because it was just not what I was there for. Like if you are looking for a like family drama book, like maybe you will enjoy it, maybe you won't, because I don't think like the family drama was good. I know that there was like a message behind it, which I mean, I get it. I appreciate the message, but it was just not like the story itself was not what I was there for. And now my final least favorite book was actually read this month, and it was Midnight is the Darkest Hour. And this was also a mystery thriller, and we were following Ruth and Everett, but it was like everything from Ruth's POV, but Everett was like almost always there. And basically, there is a dead body found in the town that they live at, and they start freaking out because they think that they know like what it is and that they might be connected to it. But then like more bodies start appearing, and they are like confused with what is happening. And there is also some sort of legend in their town of the Low Man, who's like a creature that kills people. And so basically they are investigating like who are those bodies and like who killed them, and also who the Low Man might be, because obviously he's not actually a supernatural creature, because this is a mystery thriller, not like a horror book. And so they are trying to figure all that out. And also there are so many Twilight references in this book, it is ridiculous. Like the main character is obsessed with Twilight, and it was funny like the first, I don't know, 5 times she mentioned it, but the whole book was Twilight references, and I was losing my mind. And I also wasn't really liking the characters. I mean, most of the characters in this book are supposed to be hated, but I mean the main characters. I wasn't even liking the main characters. And yeah, I wasn't, loving it, but I was like interested enough in the mystery, was feeling like a 3-star. But then the main character actually voiced her theory of like who the killer was and who the Low Man was. And that was the most ridiculous thing I've ever read. And so, like, it lowered my rating. And then the ending happened, and I absolutely hated it. So it lowered it even more. And yeah, this one just really did not work for me. So moving on to my most disappointing books of this year. So ones that I expected to love, and they just did not live up to my expectations. And the first one was They're Watching You. And this was actually one of my anticipated releases of the year, which is why I was expecting to really like it, and then I didn't. And basically we were following Marin, and her friend and roommate Poppy, I think, had gone missing 2 weeks ago, and everyone seems to think that she just ran away, but Marin doesn't think so. And she is pretty sure that Poppy's disappearance is associated with the people in their boarding school that Poppy was hanging out with a lot before she vanished. And Poppy was gonna tell Marin some secret just before she vanished. And Marin obviously doesn't know what it is because she never got to hear it, but she's sure that it was about those people. And so she is investigating, trying to find her friend, and she finds a letter in Poppy's side of the room of an invitation to join a secret society. And so Marin decides to join the secret society herself, and she has to play some games, and then the games start becoming deadly and dangerous, but she's willing to do anything to find her friend. And the premise sounded super fun to me, which is why it was one of my anticipated releases. But then I didn't really like it because, first of all, I really didn't like Marin. She was kind of boring and at the same time kind of annoying. And then I absolutely hated the romance between her and another character. It was kind of ridiculous, kind of unnecessary. Just I hated it. And also the villain of the book felt like a cartoon villain, and I was just you're literally a high school student, who are you pretending to be, and then the plot twist, big reveal, was obvious from the start. So yeah, definitely did not enjoy this one as much as I was expecting, or at all, really. Then the next book was City of Nightmares, which was another one of my anticipated releases. And this was a fantasy book, and it was the first in a, I think, duology. And in the world of this book, if you dream, you become your worst nightmare. And there are ways to prevent dreaming, and pills that people can take to prevent dreaming. And when I say become your worst nightmare, it can be a physical transformation. You can become an actual monster or whatever, or it can be more of a mental transformation or something more subjective. And when you turn into a nightmare, you can keep your human mind, or you can just lose your human mind and actually become the monster that you look like. Or even if you don't look like a monster, you can mentally become a monster, And Ness is the main character, and her sister has become a nightmare, but she is one of those nightmares that retains her human mind. And she is working with an organization, sort of a cult, that take out the most dangerous nightmares. And Ness is starting to get involved with that as well. And that was the premise. But then, I mean, that was part of the book, but that was a very small part of the book. Most of the book was focused on an explosion, an assassination attempt that happened at the beginning of the book, and then Ness was trying to figure out who the targets actually were and how she was connected. And honestly, I didn't care about any of that, or about the character, or about the romance that was happening. I didn't hate it, I just didn't care. And also something that I didn't really like was that it felt like the author was, telling us how we had to think about certain things, and regardless of whether I agreed with the author or not, I didn't really like to be told that. And so yeah, I didn't hate it. It was an okay read. It was a very fast read, but it wasn't, as good as I was expecting. Next disappointing book was Where Darkness Blooms, which was actually another one of my anticipated releases. And this one was horror, and there were 3 women that had gone missing, and no one seemed to care because it was kind of the usual for their town. And the only people who cared were those women's 4 daughters, and they obviously were trying to figure out what happened to their moms. They were trying to investigate, and we knew from the start that there was something supernatural going on. So I was, expecting to be kind of scared, kind of creeped out with like a whole town that felt haunted. That was what I was expecting from it. That was what I was wanting from it. But that is not what I got, because most of the book was just following the girls, not even like investigating, but just living their lives. And I didn't really care about them enough to care about their lives. I was just there for the, horror elements, which only came like in the very end of the book almost. And I mean, I did really enjoy that part, but that wasn't enough of it. So once again, I was disappointed. Next book was The Ashes and the Star-Cursed King, which is the second book in the Crowns of Nyaxia. Crowns? I don't even know anymore. Which was a fantasy romantasy. Honestly, I don't really know the difference. But like there was fantasy and there was romance. And basically in the series we were following Oraya, who was a human, but she was the adopted daughter of the Vampire King. And she was going to compete in a competition, and basically that competition was held by the goddess of death, and whoever won would get a wish granted by the goddess of death. And Oraya obviously wanted that wish granted because she wanted to, not feel afraid all the time, because she was the only human in a world of vampires, and so she needed to win that. And most of that competition, like, she has to fight herself, but there are some phases that she has to align with someone, and she aligns with a guy called Rain. And in the first book it was mainly about the competition itself and the trials, and seeing them fighting and everything. And I really, really enjoyed the first book, and I also liked the reveals at the end. So I had high expectations for the second book. But then I actually started reading the second book, and I was very, very disappointed, because not only there was no plot other than the romance, I also started hating the characters in the romance, because especially the main character, I mean, I never really liked the guy, but Oraya, she started acting in such a weird way, in a way that I did not expect her to act. Her actions made no sense to me. And if we join that with the fact that there was no plot throughout the book except for the romance, I was bored and I was angry the whole book basically, and I just really enjoyed the first one. So yeah, I was definitely disappointed. And the fifth disappointing book was Hark the Herald Angels Scream, which was a horror Christmas book that I read this month, obviously because it's a Christmas book. This one was short stories. It was a short story collection, and the reason why it was disappointing was because I read the first short story and I absolutely loved it. I thought it was so creepy the whole way through, but then the end, absolutely loved that. And then I read that one and went to sleep. So I was the next day when I woke up and I was ready to read, I was okay, I'm gonna absolutely love this book because the first short story was so good. And then I didn't like any of the other short stories. So yeah, I mean, some of them were okay. I'm not gonna say I didn't like any. Some of them were okay, 3 stars, and the others were I gave 2 stars. But I didn't really, really like any of them. And I just love the first one so much that I just, my expectations were unreasonably high after reading the first one. And the others did not reach my expectations. So yeah, that was definitely another disappointing book. And now moving on to better things, moving on to my favorite books of 2023. So the first one was Lost in the Moment and Found, and this was one of my anticipated releases, so the expectations were already high. And this was the 8th book in the Wayward Children series, which is a fantasy series of novellas. And in each book we follow a kid that goes through some magical door that leads them to another world, and they get to explore that world. And sometimes we see them when they get back to the original world, to the world without magic, and trying to, figure out how to adapt to being in their home world again. And I definitely have mixed feelings about this series because I love the books where we get to like explore a new world with the character. And I don't really love the ones where we just see like the character going on some kind of quest, on some kind of task. And this one specifically, we were following Antoinette, and she had gotten to the shop where the lost things go because she herself got lost. And we actually see like her home life before she finds herself in the shop. And honestly, like it was so sad. And then when she is in the shop, we do get to see like glimpses of other worlds through the shop because like it opens up to other worlds. And we also get to meet people from those other worlds, and I absolutely loved it. And we also get to know the story of like how the shop was created, which was also so sad, but at the same time so amazing. And I also really loved Antoinette. She was so cute, so adorable, and again so sad. And this book like emotionally destroyed me, but in the best way possible, and I loved every second of it. Next favorite book was Children of Memory, and this is sci-fi and the third book in the Children of Time series. And in this series, in like the first book, there was a group of humans that left a dying Earth, and they were looking for a new home, basically a new planet. And there were like planets somewhere out in the universe that had been terraformed, that had been prepared for human life, and so they were looking for one of them. And they do reach one of those planets, but after the planet was terraformed, like it was a very long time until those humans got there, and there was like a new species that was taking over the planet basically because they were infected with a virus that we learned about in the beginning of the book that like accelerated the evolution of species. And so those species of like an animal basically, they evolved really really fast and they were ruling the planet. And so that species and the humans were like fighting for who deserves to have the planet basically. And then in the second book we get to a new location and we meet two other species. And in this third book we get to yet another location and meet another species. And the new species in this book that we meet was really really interesting because they like the way they interacted with each other was very interesting because it had to kind of be in pairs because they had like a very special bond, like the pairs, and they interacted in a very very interesting way. And also in these books, in this series, there is always a dual timeline, and obviously we have the past and the present ish. And it's always really fun to try to figure out how we got from the past to the present because it is always wildly different. And this one was definitely like the most confusing because it was the most different, and there were a lot of things in the like present-ish timeline that were making absolutely no sense. But I had a theory like one third in, and I was so excited for my theory to be right because I just thought it was such a cool idea. And that like it was right, it was what was happening. And I mean like I was almost 100% right, and I was so happy about it. And I loved it. And the ending I absolutely loved, and I also absolutely love the characters in the series, like the ones that we have been following from book one, but also the new ones. I got like very attached to every single character, and like the world and the creatures and like everything in these books is fascinating, and I just loved it so much, and obviously one of my favorites. Next favorite book is The Fires of Vengeance, which is book 2 in the Burning series. And this is a fantasy series, and this one is the last one that is currently out. But book 3 is coming out in the next year, and I am so excited about it. But basically, in this series, we are following a boy named Tao, and he is trying to get revenge on the people who ruined his family and who ruined his life. And in order to get his revenge, he needs to enter the army. But in the society that he lives in, there are like two big groups of people. There are the nobles and the lessers. And Tao is a lesser, and there is also like an army for the nobles and an army for the lessers. So he has to enter the army of the lessers. And in the first book, like we see basically like his training and the trials that he has to go through to enter that army. And like his ultimate goal is to fight the nobles, because the people who ruined his life were nobles, but he has to like go through all of those steps. And this is, like I said, fantasy, so there are dragons, there are demons, there is magic, and I really liked book one, but like I love the beginning and I love the ending, but the middle, I felt like it was, just a little repetitive. So I still gave it 4 stars. I still really enjoyed it. But this one, like, it became so much bigger, and we saw like so much more of the world and of the magic and of like the magical creatures, and even like other dimensions, not exactly, but kind of. And I just loved every single second of this book. I also really love the main character, even though like sometimes he definitely does not, make the right choices. But I can't say that I wouldn't do exactly the same thing if I was in his position, because like he has lost everything, and I was not expecting him to, be like always making the right choices, like always doing the right thing, because he was really hurt and he just obviously wants revenge. And yeah, he's suffering. And yeah, this book, I mean this series in general, but especially this book, they definitely made me suffer as well. It was really sad, like it was pain all the way through, but I just love it, and I love the main character, and I am so like invested in his story, and absolutely love this one. Cannot wait for the next one. Next favorite book was Awe, and this was literary fiction, which is definitely out of my comfort zone. Even though most literary fictions I read, I do end up liking, I don't really read that many because they are like more character driven, like slower paced books. And I usually tend to enjoy like very fast-paced books, like very action-packed books. So yeah, literary fiction is definitely out of my comfort zone. And in this book, we were following two brothers, Arama and Taukiri, and they had lost their parents before like the start of the book. And Taukiri is the oldest brother, and he leaves Arama with their uncle and aunt. He thinks that that is like the best thing for Arama, because Taukiri is older, but he's still pretty young. He doesn't think he can like take care of his brother as well as like actual adults. So he leaves his brother there, and Arama is obviously very sad for losing his parents, but also he feels very abandoned by his brother, and his own life with his aunt and uncle is definitely not good. So like he is struggling, and we see him, suffering every day. And at the same time, like Taukiri is also struggling on his own, and he still thinks that like he did the best thing he could for his brother, but he's struggling. And we also see like there is a third POV that has like two characters. And I mean, it was very sad from the beginning, but when you find out like how it connects to those two brothers, it becomes like even more sad. And yeah, this book is basically, following those characters like during their grief, and like that is the plot basically. And yeah, it was definitely like very slow paced, but I really connected to the characters. I really cared about them. And yeah, it was such a sad story, but at the same time, like it was really hopeful, and that was like a perfect combination. And also the writing was absolutely beautiful. Like sometimes I had to stop and just like admire the writing, because it was so beautiful. And yeah, like it was really sad, really it made me really emotional. Like I didn't cry because I don't like ever, not ever, like I cried with 2 books in my life, but other than that I don't really cry with books. It's really hard. But like if I was, watching this story unfold on a screen, I 100% would have cried, because it made me very emotional. And yeah, I just loved it, and obviously it is one of my favorites. And now my last favorite book actually was read this month, so I'm glad that I finished it, because I finished it last week, so I'm glad I finished it before filming this video. And that was Bonesmith, and that is the first book in the House of the Dead, I think it's a duology, and that is fantasy. And we are following Ren, who is a bonesmith, and bonesmiths basically can separate the like ghosts, the spirits, from the bodies of people like after they die. And some of the bonesmiths are Valkyrs, which are like warriors that fight the ghosts, and Ren wants to be a Valkyr. And in the beginning of the books, she is like competing to become a Valkyr, but she is betrayed, and so she does not manage to, you know, become a Valkyr, and she is sent to the wall that separates like their countries from the breach, which is just full of undead. Like the prince also goes there, and he's actually kidnapped. And so Ren wants to prove herself because she still wants to become a Valkyr and prove that she's capable. So she is determined to find the prince and get him back. And to do that, she actually has to team up with an ironsmith. And ironsmiths and bonesmiths are kind of enemies. And while she is like on the other side of the wall, she finds people that she thought were not supposed to even like exist anymore. And she also finds that there is some magic she never knew could be possible. And yeah, I love this book. Obviously, I love the main character. I mean, I love all three characters: Ren, Julian, who was the ironsmith, and Leo, who was the prince. I loved all of them. And also, I kind of liked the romance in this book, which is huge for me. That is a huge win. And I love the world. I love the magic system. I love like the dead, like every scene with the dead. Absolutely loved it. And I loved the plot as well. Like I was invested from the start. I was like obsessed with the world, obsessed with the characters, obsessed with the plot, obsessed with the magic. And then the like reveal, the kind of plot twist, I kind of saw it coming, but I wanted it, you know, I wanted it to happen. I wanted it to be the reveal, and it was. And so I was also very happy with that. And yeah, I loved every second of reading this book. And yeah, it was definitely one of my favorites of this year. And yeah, those are the 15 books I wanted to tell you about. And honestly, like I had a lot more books that I loved than the books that I like didn't like. It was so much easier to choose the like worst books and the most disappointing because there weren't like as many of them. And for the favorite books, it was hard to choose just 5 because there were so many books that I loved this year. And yeah, it was definitely a very, very good reading year. And yeah, that is everything for this video. So thank you so much for watching. I really hope that you have enjoyed it. And if you did, give it a like and subscribe. And I will talk to you next time. Bye!